So I've gone ahead and UV'd and baked this, and I want to show you a problem that I found with our topology as it stands now. In Substance Painter, it looks alright from a distance, but if we pull in, we can see some pretty noticeable stair-stepping, and that problem goes away and gets more evident at the same time when we add materials. So it looks okay until you look at it on the side and you notice these dark shading here. If you look dead on, like this looks like our high poly, but pull it to the side and we notice that this shading happens here. And that's because of bake skewing, and bake skewing happens, if I turn on our wireframe here, bake skewing happens based on your low poly's topology. So you'll notice that this edge here is pulling the normals in towards this point, and that's happening all the way up across the entire model. The only way to fix that is to add more topology. In our current workflow, there's other software like Toolbag 3 where you could paint the skewing out and keep this exact topology. In a production setting, I would suggest using Toolbag 3, but it's not part of our software workflow and it's a little bit expensive. So I'll show you how to fix this by using extra topology. But you don't have to. If you don't want to, I'll understand. But for those who are perfectionists and want to know how to fix this error, if you're going to go into modeling 2 or you want to be better at modeling in general, you can go ahead and do what I'm going to do. With our current topology, you can grab this twist, go into edge mode, and pick an edge just kind of in the middle, right about here. We want to get the sharp edge that defines this crease. So we'll grab this one, this one, this one, and the last one. You want to get each one around, and then holding down Control, right click, you want to go to Grow Selection, Grow Along Loop, and let go of your click. And you'll notice that it went up and down. Now we can tap G a few times. You'll notice it keeps growing. We just want to grab all of the creased parts. Well, they're not technically creased, but all of these sharp parts of this twist. Just keep tapping G, and at some point down here, it's going to go a little bit crazy, like right there. It's not following this, it's following out here instead. So instead of tapping G, we're just going to go through by hand and select the rest. So holding Control Shift, click, click, click. We might not even need these bottom pieces, so I'm going to unselect that. And then deselect the ones it made the first time. And let's check the top. Yep, same deal here. It kind of got off. It shouldn't have been that inaccurate, but it sure was. Okay. Pull it up just to here. Turn on the high poly just to check, make sure this would be sensible. It's going to stop right here, or the bevel will stop right here and it'll go into whatever the shape is. Which if we change that, we'll see is actually going to carry on this poly loop here, which is good. That'll flow well. Alright, so now let's bevel. So Shift, right click, radio menu, bevel. This will bring up your fraction editor, or your fraction here. You want probably like a 0.2. We can turn the high poly back on to see. It's going to be inside, so make that transparent. Okay, I know a trick to make this match more, so probably 0.15. Actually, no, that'll probably be fine. Yep, 0.15. Gonna change this to restricted. Zoom out. Yeah, that should make okay. I will hide this, delete history, And you'll notice this has changed our smoothing. So if we do that, you'll see all these edges are hard now. But because we don't have that super hard crease here, we can actually just soften all of this. So edge mode, marquee select, probably about there. Yeah, let's just grab the whole thing. Make sure it's even. Shift, right click, soften, harden edge, soften edge. And then we want to come back down here and harden these 90-degree angles because they're still 90 degrees. Shift, right click, harden. And you'll notice we have some n-gons here. We should clean those up too. So vertex mode, shift merge vertices, target weld tool, and we'll just pull these down to where it looks okay. Check up top. This is okay, however, we might want to bring that down. Yeah, that's better. Let's check with a high. Nah, go back. Maybe even bring that up. Gonna select the high poly, turn off, restricted. Live surface, grab your low poly. This doesn't have to be hyper accurate, just bringing it up. You can see how it's cutting in here. I'm just pulling it up here. And tap Q to drop the tool. Hide the high poly. Now we can actually start UVing. Delete history and save. Well, actually, here's an n-gon. Multi-cut tool. Oh, live surface is still on. Turn that off. Multi-cut tool. That's a quad. That's an n-gon. Alright, we're going to triangulate on export anyway, so that'll get fixed. That's a hard edge, so just to make sure all of these are soft. Why aren't you softening? Alright, let's figure that out. Not sure what was causing it, but if you have that same problem, I just deleted these two faces and then bridged. So I selected these top edges, these bottom edges, shift, right click, and bridge. Then I grabbed these edges and softened. So maybe they weren't actually welded in the middle, it was just like a face here and a face here that wasn't welded here. But I think we can UV now. So grab your object, open up your UV editor, UV editor. Mine popped up over here. Your UVs are probably going to look crazy. I've already UV'd mine once to show you that example, but I'm going to wipe all these away by doing, make sure this is selected, UV, camera based, and then I'll wipe all your UV information away and make a camera based UV. So you can kind of think of this as like a Christmas present or a banana, I suppose. We're going to take the surface of this and peel it apart so that we can see it flattened out in 2D space. And remember, we want to split our UVs along the hard edges we've already made. So if you've already made your hard edges, great. If not, I suggest you go back and check out that part of the previous video. Go back to object mode. I have a really easy way for you to select all of your hard edges with just one button. but it takes a little bit of setup. You have to use a script, and the script is super easy. This is the text for it right here. And then you want to put this text into your command line, which should be down here. There's Mel, and there's also Python, so make sure you're in Mel. With a copy and paste, then hit enter, and you should have all of your hard edges selected. With those edges selected, don't click anything else, just come back to your UV editor, right click, go to edge, and then shift right click, go to cut. And now, when you go back in here, you want to click, go to, object mode. You should be able to click on your object. Then in here, you want to go to shell mode, so shift right click, or just right click, UV shell. We should be able to select this. If not, okay, cool. There's still one more thing we need to do to fix what we just did for edge select, but for right now, you should be able to hit shell mode, then shift, right click, unfold. So to fix that edge thing, if you go back into here, object mode, and you want to say select a different edge, you can't select these edges anymore. You can only select the edges that we did the Harden command on. That's because we made a selection constraint. And to undo that selection constraint, I have a hotkey up here, but that is select, use constraints, click that, and then you want to do close and reset. So now you can select any edge you want. And to show you that again, just grab the object, put in that script at the bottom, hit enter, and now we have our edges. Go into edge mode. Oh no, we can only select these. It's okay, just select your thing, select, use constraints, close and reset. Now if you want to make hotkeys for that, you can grab that one, obviously by going in there and then hitting Control Shift, and it should pop up at the end of your list. I need to delete all these extra ones I've shown you. And then you can also make a shortcut for this by going to Windows, General Editors. At the bottom is Script Editor. That'll open up. And then you'll see two tabs here. There's Mel and Python. Remember, we're working in Mel, so make sure Mel is selected. Paste in that code, highlight the code, then with middle mouse button over it, just hold down middle mouse button and drag it up to your shelf, and then it'll appear right there. If you want to name it and stuff, you can go in here and do like edit and edit pop-up. But for you, you should just know like that's your hard edge selector. I'm going to remove that and we can get on to UV. So delete history, save, and let's start working on this. Go to shell mode, grab all your shells, shift, right click, orient shells. This will snap them in at 90 degrees either way. And then we do shift, right click, layout, just to make sure everything is the same size. Texel density wise, it'll take a moment. There we go. And let's start figuring out what pieces are what. So obviously these are all the same. Drag these over here. Same idea as in 3D. W is move, E is rotate, and then pirate button R is scale. Won't need to do too much scaling. Q is drop tool, of course. So we should probably orient these all in the same direction, but let's figure out what this piece is. Oh, and an easy way to do something is, like, the camera's up here. What's this piece? Just go into your 3D view and tap F, and it'll shoot you straight to it. These are the stair-stepped ones. They don't wrap around. If you remember, we made the ones that wrap around logically, and these are just stair-stepped. Because of how this is built and how we did our high poly, we can just grab this edge here, double-click, all the way down. It should terminate right there. And then shift, right-click, cut, and then shell mode. Click on it in shell mode. Shift, right-click, unfold, and it should unfold just fine. Ideally, we would want this to be straightened, but it's not a big deal. But I'll show you how to do that anyways for straightening. Move that over to the side. Let's figure out what this is. Tap F. It's our twisty bit. Because we beveled these here, remember, well, I didn't show you that, but before we had to cut along each one of these and we made strips. Now we're not going to need to do that. And an easy way to get this unwrapped is go into face mode, click on our newly created bevel piece here, just click here and then shift double click here. It should wrap all the way around. It's okay that it goes up. And where does it terminate? Does it even go all the way down? It should. Am I blind? Okay, there we go. It stopped right there. Good. So all we need to do is control, marquee select with left, right about there, and then it should only have the piece in the middle. Yep, that's fine. And then control, right click radial menu, two edges, two edge perimeter. And we're going to want to select this one right here just so that it goes all the way up. It's okay. We're going to fix this in a bit, but to make it really quick, shift, right click, cut. You just want to cut from this top piece all the way down to here, and it'll go through this. So when we go to shell mode, marquee select right here, shift, right click to radial menu, unfold. Should create two pieces. So here's most of it flattened out. And here's that little strip we just made with that face selection, and then we went to its edges. And that's a real easy thing to fix. We'll just come in here to edge mode. We will grab over here this clicky thing with the circle around it. It's basically we can draw circles to select things. We're going to select this edge side. Actually, we don't need that one. Let's grab these right here. You'll see how it's highlighting the pieces over here that it's going to select, and if we hover here, this red edge lines up to that one, so we're just going to grab these here. I just clicked by mistake, so hit Control Z, then Control Shift click just to add these to our selection. It's okay if you over select, no big deal. It'll only sew what it can sew. So, S-E-W-S-O, Shift, right click, move and sew edges. It'll get kind of funky, that's fine. Q, UV select, shift, right click, unfold, unfold, and it's together. So let's figure out, I think, because these are the hard edges down here, right? Edge mode, click that, F, correct. That's what they are. So we need, we don't need to split those. But I would like to split those. You can see this weird shading here. It'll probably bake fine, but just to avoid that, I'm going to select these. And with those selected all the way through, we will do in our UVs, shift, right click, cut, UV shell, marquee select those, pull them away. We can also sew up this edge here, so just edge mode, click right there, shift, right click, move and sew edges. Anything weird going on up here? Yep, same thing. UV shell, unfold it again. Probably unfold these two. Yep, now they straightened out. Cool. Alright, what's next? Everything else looks pretty good. Keep those up and down. Let's make these go up and down as well. You can do, see how these are going up and down? These are up and down, but these are not, just for the sake of, you know, sense. Like, what if we wanted edge details going up through here, and we wanted them to stay consistent? We should probably keep these in the same orientation as these. So grab those guys, E, hold down J, as in jogging. I don't know why it's J, honestly, but with your rotate turned on and J held down, left click and it'll snap. So snap those up. And this one right here. Guess we should also make sure these are all oriented in the same direction as well. I don't think they are. Edge mode. So this edge here on the top represents this edge here on the top. So if we click this one, ideally, we'd want that to be the same, but it goes to the bottom. So all we have to do is shell mode, grab it, hit E, hold down J, rotate up. And I'm guessing these are the same because they have the same topology, so not even going to bother checking. These ones, just by looking at them, we can't tell, so we do have to go check their edges. Grab the top edge. That's all the way at the top. Grab this top edge. That one's at the top as well. This one, same deal. And that one. Okay, cool. They're all oriented the same direction. Let's straighten these out. I'm not quite sure which way we're going to get the most texel density out of this. So texel density is per shell. Like we can grab, let me pull it over here. I'm going to go to transform, scroll down to texel density. With a shell selected, you can hit get, and that's your textile density at a map size of 4K. So this shell is going to get a textile density of 330 pixels, or pixels per unit. If we scale it up and do a get, it's more than doubled. If we scale it down and do a get, it's at 183. So go back a couple times, do a get. So let's say that we have this piece scaled small over here and we want it to be the exact same textile density as this. So we could just click this one, do get, click this one, do set, and make it the same textile density. This is important because you only have a certain amount of pixels for your map, and the more pixels something has, the more detail it can get, because you can only paint so detailed in Substance Painter when you pack details into the pixels. So ideally we want all these to be the same, so we'll just do set, and those will snap down. But how this impacts laying out, I'm not sure if these should ideally all be the same direction when we go to hit layout, and it will pack them efficiently, or if we do it this way, clearly we're getting more space to use by doing this, and because of that, maybe it'll be allowed to be bigger. I don't know, but just to keep everything in the same direction, I'm just going to orient them all up, and then when we hit layout, I'll figure out how bad it really is. Shouldn't be too bad. I guess I can just show you what that looks like right now, because we're kind of done. So yep, that was a shift right click and then I went to layout. So we see this. If I orient them this way, just two of them, grab them all, shift right click, layout, layout UV. Do we get a better textile density? Let's check. Get is 338, and if I step back and do a get, 314. So yeah, we got a little bit more textile density. Not a big deal, but it was more. These are considerations that you have to take up with your art director for like technical considerations in a game, or let's say I want stripes running up and down, and I want those stripes to be blue up here and red down here in our texture. We would have to make sure that these are oriented in the same direction, and we'd have to kind of sacrifice that little bit of textile density. And it's such a small amount, it's not a big deal. I'm going to keep them facing the same direction. It's okay that things are packed inside of each other like this, as long as they aren't overlapping, it's just fine. Let's orient these at some 90-degree angle that's sensible. You can just kind of wiggle them in that, and then grab them, shift, right click, orient shells, and it'll snap. Let's at least make these go up and down. See, this won't orient sensibly. Shift, right click, orient. It'll want to do that, so just by hand, keep it pointing up. This is our top right here, if you didn't realize that. Same thing here, and I'll show you what this looks like. I've hardened these edges around, and then without this cut here, it just looks like this in the UV editor. It's going to be really stretched when we go to texture, so I've cut along the top through here and then harden these edges as well, just because you might as well. It's free shading. Let's delete history, Control S, save. This should work fine. It's unfolded. I don't know if I hardened that or not. Let's grab these, because that shading is still kind of bad. Shift, right click, soften harden edge is harden edge. There we go. It's better now. And I mean, that's a free harden too, might as well. I have another script for that. You don't have to do that part, but I'm just going to grab this. Which one is it? I believe it's this one. Yep. So I have another script that with the object you have selected, it'll look at the UV shells, it'll grab all the edges of the UV shell and harden them. And when you're doing hard surface, that's just a good practice to do. I can show you that script if you want to grab it, if it's that important to you. So notice this is a Python script. So when you copy and paste it, and if you make your own shortcut, you want to make sure it's in Python. And I know this is a lot for you to write down or copy over right now. I'll put this text in the description or in a download somewhere that you can go grab it. So looking at our UVs, going to go to shell, shift, right click, unfold one more time. Going to do a get, set just to make sure everything's even, then shift right click layout one last time. There's a good amount, like look at all this empty texture space up here. It's not that big of a deal if your texture is going to be one asset only, and this is as good as you can do it. That's what you got to do. But ideally, you'd want to put two objects on here. So like say you're also making a dagger for a set, you could put its UVs up here and then save that for another texture. But let's straighten this. For those of you who made the twisted leather, I'll show you how to UV that now. If I hide this, and then I think I named it Mace Twist Low right here. Bring it back over to 0. And I'll show you how to UV the leather itself. There's no need to go through all the other stuff, just the leather. And to get that wrapped leather effect, what we're going to want to do is split along our hard edges at the bottom, the hard edges at the top, just like before, and then double click here. You should get this full loop on the inside, not this outside edge, but this inside edge. And then shift or control shift click right here, just to get it right down to this point. And then up at the top, where does it go? Right here. If you've retopologized and made a triangle like mine terminated there, yours might go all the way up. But I'm going to follow this edge loop all the way up. Maybe double click, there we go. And it should end right there. And then in your UVs, open up a UV editor. I think I've already done this. Yeah, mine's already split. But basically you'd cut and then unfold whatever the piece would look like. You just unfold the leather, and then when you do that, it should just look like this. So here we have a challenge. If you remember what I just said about texel density, we'll get texel density for this, 370, and we'll get texel density for this, or actually we'll set this to 370, how about that? You'll notice to have that same texel density for this piece, this long strip of leather, it's not going to fit in our 0 to 1 space, and we need it to fit in our 0 to 1 space to bake. So to get it to fit, we can either cut it here, just take an edge near the middle, cut, grab both the shells, orient it, probably go this way. It'll have more space to fit if we go this way. And then they'll probably unfold, or they'll probably lay out something like this, or we could eyeball it and chop it up even more. But that's also kind of ruining the whole reason we're doing this in the first place, right? We're doing this so that we can have a continuous leather strap all the way up that doesn't have a seam on it. Now it's okay if it does have a seam, it's an organic thing. You can come through and kind of play with it to make it look okay. Put some edge wear on there and hide the seam pretty well. Or, let me bring it back over. Because it's an organic, you can probably just squish it like this. And it'll work just fine. Because if you think about leather, like it's an organic pattern, it's going to just be what it is. It's going to be noisy. To pack that noise into this isn't going to be such a big deal. If we were doing something very specific, like if we had, I don't know, a texture weave or any very obvious pattern that needed to hold up, squishing like this would squish it the wrong way here. If I turn on checker pattern, you can see what I'm talking about. So, well, let's lay it out first. It'll take a second. It's taking a lot longer than just a second. What is it doing, Maya? It's just 2 shells. Alright, I'll be back when Maya is wanting to cooperate. Okay, Maya had a heart attack, but we're back to what I was going to show you. So this is what we had before. If we go to the checker pattern up here, you can see all these checkers are perfectly even. They're just the same square. If we're going to squish it down to fit, we're going to distort it. Well, let's not do that. Let's get the move tool. Now they're just big rectangles. So if we wanted a nice checker pattern, or you can imagine like if they're nice circles or some kind of futuristic, I don't know, sci-fi panels or something, that would be distorted. But because it's leather, it's probably going to look just fine. So I'm going to squish mine in like this, or you can cut yours and then give it a layout, and Maya will figure out the best way to put it. But I'm just going to fit mine in here by hand. Alright, so for my twist one, my twisty leather, this is my UVs. If you didn't do this bevel thing, you would probably split along each one of these sharp edges, and then you'd have several strips of your inside twist. With this and the UVs of the other one, we're probably ready to make a cage, and then we can get on to baking. So regardless of which version you're making, grab your high poly, make sure it's all one object. Some of you might still have your pieces broken off into different pieces, so just left click, marquee select, shift, right click, combine. I'm going to get an error because mine was already one piece, but for you, just make sure it's one piece. And the reason we're doing that is because if I turn on my low poly here, wherever it is, there it is. Our low poly is all one solid object, so there's no need to really have any separate pieces in our high poly and then parent it to anything because of our naming conventions in Substance Painter. If the naming convention, like if the high poly has a parent and then a bunch of stuff underneath it, but our low poly is just one object, Substance Painter is not going to understand what we're trying to tell it to do, and it won't bake. And speaking of naming conventions, just for ease, I'm going to name my low poly Mace underscore low, and I'll bring back the high poly. Name that Mace underscore high. And now we're ready to make a cage, so I'll click the low poly, and I will duplicate that with Shift D. And it's made Mace underscore low 1. I'll just rename this Mace underscore cage, and click off, and then click Mace cage again. Then do Control, hold down right mouse button, two vertices. Then I will double click the move tool, which is right here. Should bring up our tool settings. Then I'll go to normal for axis orientation. And then you'll notice our move tool has changed to this N, U, and V. We want to grab the N handle and pull it out until we can no longer see the high poly. Let's check all the way up here and at the bottom. Don't go too far, just enough to where we don't see the high poly. And then we'll go back to object mode. And then if you tap W, you notice you can't move it. That's because we're still in normal mode here. Just be sure to turn that back to object or world, and now we can manipulate stuff again. So we've got our mace cage. Gonna hide that. Our mace cage, our mace high. Actually, there's two mace highs. Let's make sure we got them all. Okay, it's the underscore one, or the lowercase one. Alright, so now we're gonna export all these. With them all showing, I'm just gonna marquee select. I'm gonna tap W, and then D as in dog, X, hold down middle mouse button, drag it out here, just snap around, and I'm going to snap that right to the origin point, 0, 0, 0. And now when you select any of them, they should all have the same origin, or their little gizmos or handles should be in the same spot. And I'm going to click one, doesn't matter which one we end up selecting, that's the mace cage. So I'm going to export, I have a shortcut right there, but we will go to File, Export Selection, and with FBX export selected down here. If it's not selected, just hit FBX export. And then these settings should be fine, except for our low poly and cage, we want to hit triangulate. And this is the cage, so mace underscore cage. I already have one here. Export, overwrite for me. Gonna move it off to the side. Just gonna click which one comes up. It is the mace low. I'm gonna tap G because we just did an export, so sensibly it should do it again, right? There we go. Triangulate, smoothing groups, and it's the low, so let's find the low, mace underscore low, export selection, move it off to the side, and select the high, hit G. I don't want the high poly to be triangulated because there's not really any sense in that, so no triangulation, and mace underscore high, and you should be able to bring all of those into Substance Painter and start baking. In Substance Painter, go to File, New, use the Unreal Engine 4 algorithmic template that should be there by default. Click the select button next to File, grab your mace underscore low, or whatever you've called it, just make sure it's the low poly. Document resolution of 2048 is fine. We want DirectX, and we want compute tangent space per fragment, because this model is going to go into Unreal Engine 4, and it likes to have that turned on. And we'll hit OK. And you'll notice I have two maces because I'm going to show you how to texture both of the handles, but everything else is the same. Over here, you want to go to your texture set settings, Might be in layers by default, but texture set settings is right here. I think if it's not there, you can go to Window, Views, and texture set settings. Click that button. But when you're over here, you want to hit Bake Mesh Maps, and then our output size 2048 is fine. You can go to 4K if you want, or 8K if you're crazy, but any of those will be fine. 2048. Hit the page button here to find the high. Mace underscore high. The cage file, Mace underscore cage, and above that don't forget to check use cage, turn that on, and then match to by mesh name, because remember we've put our suffixes for high, low, and cage. Anti-aliasing, I'm going to turn mine to 4, and then we can go to world space. I don't think there's any settings. Nope. ID. In your ID you want to go from color source to material color. AO is fine by default. If you want more detail, you can add your secondary rays. Self-occlusion, let's do, wait, ignore backface. I'm going to turn off ignore backface so we get deep shadows. Curvature position is fine. We don't need thickness, so I'm going to turn that off. And then I will bake. And once your bakes are done, it's a good idea to go over your mesh and check for any errors. Just going to look through mine. This actually looks a lot better now than it did before. And I'm pretty sure I have some errors through here. So yeah, this is some cage clipping through. I'll show you what that looks like, and I'll show you how to fix it. Same deal here, maybe. Bottom should be okay. Go over to this one. And I know that this one, the cage didn't come out enough right here. So the cage is clipping through the high and the low poly. And getting an error on that. Probably the same deal here. Actually, that might not be too bad. You can go to your color map. It'll be ID right here underneath mesh maps once you bake. And we can see our colors, and you'll see that we're actually getting this blue metal here that we've had as the main piece is poking through here, so that's because of the cage problem. Not so much there. And a little bit here. And some big deal there. Alright, I'll show you what that looks like in Maya. So you can see I've got the cage here, and then underneath you can see the high poly coming through. And then if we really want to take a look at these vertices here, if I can highlight it correctly, the cage is coming in through the top and sticking through this all the way up through here. So I'll grab these vertices and pull them down. You don't have to always go into normals, like you know how we grabbed a bunch of verts and then we went in here and we changed it to normal. You don't have to do that every time when you're making a cage. That's just the easiest way to get all the verts and pull them out, you know, as correctly as possible, just away from the mesh. And then when it comes to little things like this, you can just, in your regular object mode with axis orientation object, you can just come in here and pull them apart bit by bit. So that's what I'm going to do for this. Pretty much you just want to pull things through to where they don't cause too much of an issue. Just want to make sure it encapsulates the high poly. So I'm going to do that, probably speed it up, and I'll get back to you. I had to make a change to my low poly, and if you had to do that same thing, you can update your current Substance Painter file by going to Edit, Project Configuration, Select, grab your Mace low, hit Open, and then OK. It'll load your new one in, and then all of the names of our cage and high poly should still be the same. So all we have to do is hit Bake your mesh maps again, and it should update. Alright, so my bakes are done, and nothing's peeking through. Material-wise, you can go tap M to come back to your material as it is, and this should be okay to texture. Same deal over here. And now we're ready to start texturing. But before we do that, you should probably save, so hit Control S and save where you need to save. Before we start texturing, I highly recommend you go to Substance's YouTube channel and watch their Substance Painter 2018 course introduction video series. And you can also go to Flip Normal's YouTube channel and watch their Introduction to Substance Painter Ultimate Beginner's Guide. First thing I'm going to do is delete this layer and then create a folder for each of our major pieces. So that's a folder for the main shaft, a folder for the handguards, and a folder for the leather. And I'm going to make a folder for the other leather over here as well. Let's say that 4 times fast. Other leather, other leather. So, leather stepped, leather twist, handguards, and what was the last piece? Oh, duh, shaft. The big killy part, yeah, that part. And starting with the leather twist here, I'm going to hit fill. This will create fill layer 1. I'm going to drag it into the folder for leather twist. Let's zoom in to it right here. Make it some color. And then I'm going to add a mask onto the folder itself. So clicking this, I'm going to right click, add black mask. And then I'm going to click the mask. This is the folder itself. I'm going to click the mask and then right click that mask into add color selection. And then with color selection selected, we can select all of this, but with the mask selected and underneath color selection, we'll get this properties right here. We'll do pick color, and I'll click the leather for this. And you probably already know what a fill layer is. If you click on the fill layer, you've got color, height, rough, metal, normal. We can turn them on and off just by clicking them. And within each one, we have, I'll pull this up, we've got sliders. Metallic, black is non-metallic, white is metallic. Roughness, all the way white is super rough, all the way black is super shiny. And height is, well, you can't really see it right now because we only have one level, but over here is positive, over here is negative, and when you kick out your textures at the end, this will get baked down into the normal map, and you'll be able to see, height differences like little bumps and whatnot. So let's zero this out. Substance Painter has a really nice leather as it is, so with this fill selected, I'm going to search right here for leather, and I'm going to look for leather rough. This should be it. I'm going to click that, and it's there. We've got some work to do. But you can see that, like the stretching that I was talking about earlier, because it's organic, it's not that bad. So looking at our texture, or not our texture, our reference, you can see this leather is dark. I'm going to hit something close to this. But when we pick, here, I'll also do this. Well, you can't see it. I'm going to pick the color. If you click here, you have a color picker. And if you hold it down, you can drag it around in the world. Or you can also drag it to other screens. So I'm going to use this on our reference photo to pick a color. So something kind of dark will bump up, or bump down, I suppose, the roughness. We want some kind of shine there. The dot's intensity, what is that? That's messing with the normal, I think. We can go into height, and that should show up in here. Tap M to go back to material. You don't have to follow me precisely. I'm just trying to get something that looks okay. Let that render for a moment. Okay. Height range is already pretty low. That's good. And now let's add some wear to it. So let's name this leather base. Bring this down some. Going to make a new fill. Don't know why that's taking so long. Let's call this where base. Make a folder. So we've got a folder inside of the folder. I'm going to drag it in here and name this where. And then with the where, we only want really the color and the roughness, so we'll keep the height as well. So turn off normal, turn off metalness. The color can be just some kind of light brown. And then on the where base, I'm going to make a black mask. Right click, black mask. And I'm going to make a generator. And I'm going to click this generator button in the properties. I'm going to add a mask editor. And there is a ton of stuff you can do in here. But right now, all I want to do is change the color of the top parts of each of these ridges, because if you look at our reference, like we've got this leather here, but then this leather here is different. I'm not going to recreate the little strands, but I am going to make this a different color so it stands out. And an easy way to do that is to, within your mask editor, selected, curvature will be at half by default. I'm going to crank that down. I'll go into mask mode here. So that's black now. Just a moment ago, go back to the editor. Curvature, it was about there. It's just looking at our curvature map. We don't really need our curvature map right now. What we want is our world space normal. So I'm going to crank that all the way up, open it up by clicking this little arrow, and from top to bottom, that's good. We want all that there, and maybe we want it this white, but not this dark. So we can play with this a little bit, kick up the contrast, and then maybe add levels to knock some of that back. So on the mask, right click, levels, we'll crank out that. And then even just now if we hit M, you can see I've narrowed it down to just right there. So let's break up some of this by adding a grunge to that. So right click, fill, and with our fill selected, we'll click this grayscale uniform color and we'll search for a grunge. Maybe a grunge leather, because that would make sense, so I'll just search leather. And if we click right here, we can see that we've just added a leather to it, but it's on normal, so it's just going to replace everything we've just done. So let's add that to multiply. And now it'll only show up right where we want it. Probably turn up the, here, gotta go back to our fill. Turn up the scale maybe to 4. That might be too much. 2. And can we make it a little bit more crunchy with contrast? Tap M to go back. And I'm going to play with this color some. It's kind of ugly. A little bit lighter, and then right here we have a little drop down. This will go to base color, height, roughness, metal, normal. In base color, or actually in any of these drop downs, you can go to this number right here and dial it back. So it's at 100% right now. Imagine this as an opacity slider. If I drag it down, it gets rid of all the color from this fill. If I go back up, it'll all come back. However, that's only affecting the base color. So its roughness value, height, metal, normal is all still there. If I want to target those, I just have to click this, like roughness, and then I can drag the slider down. It wants to save. So yeah, you should save too, Control S. So then we can drag down the roughness, and then only the color and other things are showing up. But for now, we want all of them. Well, yeah, we can actually probably bring that down some. And then our roughness can be about there. Because remember, the leather is pretty rough. It's over here. Just to get some variance. Go back to the color. Knock back the color just a bit. And then we can add some wear to this. So, well, some more wear. Here, let's call this wear top. And then I will duplicate this with the layer selected, the fill layer selected, Control D. And then I'll just do edge wear, or wear edge, rather. And I don't need all this stuff, so I'm just going to click on the fill layer itself, right click, add black mask, and it'll wipe everything in there. So then click on the mask itself, and we will go down to generator, right click generator, and we'll do metal edge wear. I know it seems kind of silly to use a metal edge wear on something that's organic, but it's got all the settings we need to set up a good edge wear. So for our custom grunge, I'm going to add this leather grunge. And our wear leather, or wear level, we can kick it back. If we alt left click into the mask like this, just like in Photoshop, we can see what we're doing. I want it to be pretty grungy. Turn down triplanar contrast and turn on triplanar contrast. Tap M to see what we're doing with the color. You know what would be really nice is if we get some micronormals in here. So for that, I can teach you about anchor points. So think about how this metal edge wear is looking at our, if I scroll down, it's looking at our curvature and our ambient occlusion map. A lot of, and also position and world space. A lot of other generators are going to also look at our normal map. But we baked all of that, and that's all baked textures or baked detail that we're not going to be able to change. So when we add these little lumps in here with the leather, it's adding it into the normals, but it's not in the baked normals. So when we do edge wear, it's not going to ever even look at this leather down here. It's just going to look at our maps. So what we want is a way to dynamically check the new things we're doing in normals and add them to our maps here so that this edge wear can look at them and make a more accurate color. And the way we do that is by anchors. And it's super easy. I know what I said might be confusing, but just check this out. Let's go to our leather base, click that, and then we'll right click, and at the bottom, add anchor point. And we'll call this leather. Yeah, I guess leather base was just fine, huh? So now we have an anchor here. And anchors only work underneath the thing that's looking at it above. So we have to keep any of our masks and stuff that are looking at anchors have to be above the actual anchor. So I can't move this down ever. But that's okay. So we'll go to our metal edge wear that we just made. And then at the bottom, we'll click micro normal. And right here, anchor points, we'll click leather base. And we want it to look at the normal. And then in micro height, because I'm not sure I'm not sure if it's using height or normal, so I'm just gonna add both. So normal and height here. So micro height's gonna look at the reference channel height, and micro normal will look at the reference channel normal. And then we'll turn on micro details right here. Turn them both on. Let that update. And now if we go into our mask, and then go back to this, we do curvature and density with the micro details on. You'll see it's actually looking at these little dots now. So maybe not that much, but tap M to go back to material. Now that looks quite a bit better. So again, with base color, because that's kind of too strong, we'll knock this back some. Just on the wear edge. And that's not fantastic. I would bake, like I'd do a high poly with leather and play with that, but this is looking pretty alright. It could probably use a little bit more variation, but I think you get the idea. You can add some more fills and filters on that. Or not filters, masks, my mistake. So we have this leather here that we just made, and we want to add some leather over here to this one. So an easy way to do that, we can either here with our color selection, we could just add another color to it. And then this has the same settings as this one. And then we can duplicate this and give it another color selection. That would be the easy way. Or we can make a smart material. And I'll show you to do the smart material way because it's beneficial for you to know how to make a smart material. So I'm going to undo that color selection I just made. We had the green and we just added the yellow. I'm going to click the minus right here to get rid of that yellow. And to make a smart material, it's probably best that we don't have a color selection here because it's going to save this, and every time we drag it somewhere, it's going to be looking for this exact green, even if it's in a whole new project and we don't even have a green. So let's just right click this and remove mask right there. So this is okay just for now. We'll right click, create smart material, and leather twist was just made right here. And we have a preview, I believe. We just hover over it. That's what we just made. So in leather stepped, we can drag that into its folder. And right here we can right click, add black mask, and we'll duplicate this. I guess we can now call it, hang on, double click here. Leather stepped 2, and close it. Click here, leather stepped 1. And then they both have black masks on them. Except, well, it's kind of disorienting, so let's turn off the twist layer. This one I'm going to add a color selection, and I'm going to pick red. And on the one below it, I will add a color selection, and I will pick yellow. So this is still the same thing. We have to come in here just to either one of them, go to leather base, and we have to change around some settings, and it'll be different strips of leather. So we change the roughness, the dot intensity, let it render, because it's kind of intensive. Is there a random seed? Yes, there is. Okay, so we'll do that too. And OBS crashed for me, but that's all right. We're back. You'll notice that between here, if we go into our mesh maps ID, like we have red and yellow, but in between is not red and yellow. There's a slight gradient. So an easy way around that is if we go to our color selection, the mask where color selection is, I'll pull this down. We just right click in the mask, add a filter. Where is filter? Click there, add a blur. And then if we alt click in here, you'll see where the mask is. So it's blurred that, and if we tap M, it's even worse kind of, but that's okay. Because I'll click in there. We're going to turn the blur down to probably a 0.1. And then we'll add a levels. So click on the mask, right click, levels, and then M to come back. And we'll play with this. We can crush that line in. And then we can even do it the other way with this one. So filter, blur, levels, go into mask. Actually, we want to turn our blur down, 0.1. And pull it this way again. Yep, grow it. So it's super noisy, and you can't even tell that they're different, but if you were going to make something different, now you know how to blend across. So if we were to change this color to like super bright, let it render, you could have an effect kind of like that. And that's, you know, that's not bad looking actually. Nah, I prefer the contrasty. Control Z. So, you know, maybe, oh, okay, so when you change colors like this and you hit Control Z, Substance Painter is going to think that, you know, you're playing around with colors and you just want to go back to what it was originally. So Control Z will always undo a bunch of colors if only you do is color change. But I kind of like this, like it's, you know, an artistic choice, like the armor did this instead. However, you notice our top-down gradient that we made earlier was only one color. So you'd have to go back and change that per these, which I'm not going to do. But now you know that's a problem, and you can apply what we learned before to this. I'm going to add the color select back to this so we can get this leather off of everything else. We want a black mask. Right click in the mask, color selection, pick color, green. So now let's do our handguards and the shaft and we'll be done. And I mean, you know, obviously we could just grab a smart material here like bronze armor, drop it into the handguards, let that update, then add a black mask and a color selection, pick color. You know, that's not horrible at all, but we're here to learn, so let's do this by hand. So delete that bronze armor. With handguards selected, I'm going to add a fill, drag it into folder, call this base metal. We want to crank the metal up, pick a color. By the way, we have the fill selected and the properties just down here. Let's do a yellowish gold. Maybe a bronze. Alright, and now we'll add some discoloration, so we'll make a new folder. Name it Discoloration. And then make a fill. Call it Discoloration 1. That's foreshadowing the fact that there might be more than one coming. Just for now, we can right-click, add black mask. Within the mask, we'll right-click, add a fill, click the grayscale at the bottom, and look for a grunge. Something kind of interesting. You know, Damascus steel could be kind of cool. You'll see that obviously it's way too big even if we click in the mask. See what we're doing with the mask. So click that fill layer, and we want to project from, we don't want to be in projection of UVs, we want to project with a triplanar so it'll wrap a little bit better. And then we turn down that hardness so there's a nice gradient, because if the hardness is all the way up, not only do we have seams here, it's now making seams here. So we'll turn the hardness all the way down to get a nice gradient. Pull this up some. Probably even twist it. You'll see it's projecting from this box here, and with this selected we have the same controls as in Maya. So we have W for move, E for rotate, R for scale. I'm going to rotate it a little bit on all of its axes just to get it coming over these edges like this. There's at least some continuity, maybe not so much there, but if we crank our scale up, maybe 4. It's a little bit better, probably even more than that. Do 10. That's noisy enough to where it's not so noticeable. Tap M to come back. I like this inverted. Where is invert? We can just invert through the mask. So with this selected, go into the mask, right click, invert mask. And it'll create a levels, and in that levels it's just inverted the colors. So go back into the grunge. You can play with these settings here. Bump up the contrast. Nah, keep it down. I'm just playing with stuff right now. And obviously this effect is too strong, and even more obviously, we need to turn on metallic. Maybe, let's look at our base metal roughness. It's fairly shiny. So within this discoloration, let's make it rough. It's already there. We can even bring the height down just a tad. A little bit goes a whole long ways with height. So you want to be working in super small increments. Maybe 2. Base color can be darker. And then in base color, I'm going to bring this down a bit. Something's happening there, that's okay. Something as in, you know, we're changing something, that's good. So I'm going to duplicate this, Control D. I'm going to rename it to Discoloration 2. Click our mask, and I'm going to change this grunge to something else. So we can scroll down where we have this grayscale grunge that we put in. Let's click that and select a new grunge. Maybe like something rough like concrete. let these load just so we can see what's going on. This is scratchy enough. So we can alt-click into our mask to see what we're doing here. Bring up the contrast. We want to... Oh, it's already in triplanar projection. Okay, good. Make it fairly subtle. Change the color. Going to see what we're doing in our base color only. I want that to be sharper, so we'll go to add filter. Bring in a sharp. Tap M to go back to your material. And let's do an edge wear now. So we'll close that discoloration filter, or folder, not filter. Make a new folder, call this edge wear. We don't really need a folder, we could just throw in another fill, but it's okay to be organized. You never know when you're going to go back and add more stuff. Edge wear fill. We want to make this fully metal. Its height can be down just a little bit. So 001. Scratch is usually kind of shiny, so we'll pump that up. And then we'll add a mask, so click on that, then right click, add black mask. Scroll down. Wait. Where are we? There. Add generator, my bad. Click generator, and then metal edge wear. And we got something pretty ugly. That's fine, we're going to fix that. Oh, OBS crashed me, so I downed my settings, so let's go back to layers. And in our metal edge wear, going to alt click into the mask so we can see what we're doing, then go back down to the metal edge wear underneath it. Maybe take down the wear level. We want to use triplanar for sure. Take the blending contrast all the way down, grunge amount to chop it up, grunge scale to make it even crunchier. Guess it'll focus more on the edges. Tap M to go back, and we've got an edge wear of some sort. And then if you wanted to do, scratches, you could click here, go to fill, drag your fill in, and pull it up here, black mask, add a fill within that mask, and look up scratches. Wait for these previews to show up. Click there, and then you'd want to do like an add, I suppose, instead of normal. So we would go to linear dodge add. And you'd crank up your scale. And then you just play with your settings to get some scratches. But I'm going to delete that, and we're going to do the shaft next, and we'll really get into mask building with this one. Bring down my properties for a bit. I'm going to close the handguards and the leather twist. With the shaft right here, we're going to add a fill. Then drag the fill into there, and then we can probably just grab, where are our materials? Well, I'll just search nickel. And we can just click nickel pure. Whenever you have a fill selected, you can click any material in here and it'll just auto update that fill to that. So we'll call this shaft base. Should have all the correct settings. It doesn't have a height, so I'm going to turn on a height because we are going to be adding some height value. So we want to make sure we at least have a base value of 0 so we can dig or build using other things above it. And don't forget to save. So we have just this solid color right now, which is fine realistically. Like, I mean, if you're looking at this, we're not really aiming for realism here. I'm just trying to show you some stuff. But artistically, a gradient would be better over large surfaces like this. So I'm going to add a gradient. And a good way to do that is just take our base color here, Control D to duplicate it, change its color a little bit, probably make it, oh, that's a nice color, I like that. So we've got that changed color. Take the second one we just made, let's call this gradient, and we'll add a black mask. And when we go into our mask, we'll add you could add a fill, and in here is a gradient. And I mean, you could do it with, you could either go into UV projection. Well, I wouldn't suggest UV projection because when we do that, none of that matches. But then you might think, okay, well, you know, try planar projection. That still doesn't grab these under here for a nice gradient. The best way to do that is to actually use, I believe it's called mask editor. So we'll do a generator instead, then click generator and mask editor. So it's the thing with all the settings from before. However, last time we used world space normal. This time we're going to use position gradient. I'm going to turn off curvature opacity. And when we click in here, you should see everything should be black now. So I'm going to alt click in our mask. Everything's black. Come back down to mask editor. Scroll down to position gradient. I'm going to slide that all the way up. Open it up. And I'm going to try to figure out how to make this pretty much white and this pretty much black. So we'll play with these settings here. Don't want too much contrast. We'll probably just pull it with balance. And you can see you've got front to back, top to bottom, left to right. We're just going from position gradient and top to bottom. So M to go back in. That looks better, but I want that to be way more noticeable. Maybe if we pump up our color. That's cool. Okay, so we've got our gradient done. Actually, we still need that. Let's put that in a folder all on its own. Because when I think of something as done, I don't want to see a fill layer. I just want to see a folder, and I can close it like that. So now this metal needs some discoloration, just like before. So we'll click the folder there, make a new folder, drag it into there, drag it back up top, call it discoloration, and then make a fill. Drag that fill inside, discoloration 1, give it a color. It was a nice gold before, so maybe we'll do a little bit deeper and a little bit rougher. Give it a black mask. Then right click, add fill. Scroll down, grab a fill. We'll do any grunge. What about the numbered grunges? Just sand dry. That could be fine. Let's look into the mask. Alt click the mask itself. That's already a good size. I was thinking maybe we might want to, click the actual fill layer. We might want to scale it or something, but 1 is pretty good. Let's do triplanar projection. Crank the hardness down. Rotate it some, just so it can carry over those edges a little bit better. Yeah, I like it soft. That contrast is pretty good as it is. Same deal here, maybe a little bit down. Tap M to see what we're doing. And okay, so you could go through base color, height, rough, metal, and drag these down all together. But if you want it all down as one uniform value, you can actually just drag down the mask value. So we've got our mask and our modifier on the mask. We can just drag down this value here, and it's kind of like an opacity slider. So I want all of it down, and I want this to be a pretty subtle effect. Just a little bit of noise. And we'll do another one of these. So click the whole fill itself, Control D, and rename this Discoloration 2. Click the fill itself right here, change its color, be a little bit brighter. And why not give it some blue? Let's see what that looks like. Go back into your fill. We can change this fill to something else. It takes a little bit of time for these to update when you hover over them. That could be interesting. Click on this mask, and it's pretty dull. We want to boost this, so contrast, balance. We're going to have to grab a levels, so we can click on the mask right here, right click, add a levels. Tap M to go back to our material, and that's a pretty strong effect. So with our grunge marble shapes right there, gonna drag it down. Oh, I got why that is, because we had the mask so low, we don't really even need the levels. It was already doing it. See, if we pull this all the way up, it's pretty strong. But I want to make that roughness value different from the other one, so it's standing out, adds a little bit more noise to it. And let's add some pitting to the metal, like some age. So I'm going to close the discoloration, make another folder, call this pitting, and I want a dark fill. Pretty brown, pretty dark. Add a black mask. Click that mask, right click it, and then add a generator. In the generator, we're going to add a mask editor. And we're going to do a whole lot of stuff here. So scroll down. We want to use both of these texture slots. So in texture 1, let's add something with dots. Maybe use this dust. Shavings, nah. Let's do dust. I know dust should work pretty good. There we go. Grunge dust spread. And you're not going to see anything change yet. That's because we have to scroll up to texture. There's texture and then texture 2. It'd be better if this was like texture 1 and texture 2 or texture 0 and texture 1, but you know, whatever. It lives in here. So we're going to crank that all the way up. And our masks should change. If you click in there, you'll see that it's going through the curvature right now because curvature is on by default. We pretty much want it on the inside and not the outside. So an easy way to do that is to go back to the mask editor, open up curvature right here, and invert. And if that's not giving you the result you want, you could just go to cavities and then undo invert, and it's just on the, obviously the cavities of your curvature map. That's looking pretty okay so far. I want these dots to be a lot smaller because right now this doesn't look like pitting. It just looks like, dotty noise with little strings in it. So with that, let's find our texture. I believe this is it right here. If we scroll up, can we do our scale? Okay, yep. So up top, not in the texture down at the bottom that we clicked, but in the actual settings where you can play with it, Open up texture, should be closed by default. We just drug it out to show it right here. Grab your scale and crank that up. Probably a 4 would be good. Yep, and we're going to kick a lot of this back, so don't worry. Bump up the contrast. Set this to multiply just for now. Turn on triplanar contrast down. And we want to grab our second texture, so we'll turn that all the way up. And I'm going to grab the same grunge dust spread, which I believe is this one. And we'll scroll up, set that one to overlay, texture 2, open it up. That's already on overlay, good. Let's scale it up to probably something pretty high, 8. All right, let's see what's actually happening right now. Nothing too much. If we add a levels and go back into mask, then go back to levels and crank this up. See how sharp this is on the edge? We're not going to want that, but so far we're boosting it pretty good. Tap M. You'll see we're getting these dots. We want those to be deeper, so it's to a height of minus 0.001. Yeah, we can make those show up a little bit better. I'm going to monkey around with this, and I'll be right back. Alright, so we've got something interesting now. From far away, it kind of falls apart. Ideally for a game, depending on how far away the player's face is going to be from it, or the player's eye. If it's something like this, you probably want these a lot bigger and a lot more pronounced. But for now, this is okay. You understand the process. We need to add that down here. So hand guard is here, color selection, pick color, and that. We could have done, the pick color, or if you like this material, you could have made it a smart material and saved it off. And then whenever you open up Substance Painter later for another project, you can just drop it on there. But for now, that works. And I think we're done. You could have done this, or you could have watched another tutorial, or you could not be watching at all, or you could have dropped smart materials on it and called it done. Either way, you're going to want to kick out your maps, so let's do that. Go to File, Export Textures. You want to select your export place, so click that, and then navigate to where you want to export. Then you want to make sure you're doing Targa, which will be just one down, Targa. Unreal Engine 4 packed by default. If you don't see it here, just click and then find it in the list. Dilation Infinite is fine. 2K is what I need you to send me. Please do not send me an 8K texture. I think we're good to go. Export. And export finished with some warnings. The warning is the fact that if you come down here, Mace low emissive can't be generated. That's because we don't have an emissive, what's it called? An emissive channel here, which is perfectly fine. We don't need one. It's just letting us know it was looking for one, didn't find one. So we open our folder to the textures. Let's look at our base color. You're going to see the UVs for both sets of maces because I just grouped them together and unfolded that so I can show you this workflow. That's what an albedo looks like. Or albedo, however you want to pronounce that. Let's go to the normal map. Normals look good. That's what they should be. If we zoom in, we can see all of our details that we added with height. Any over here, anything special? we see our dots? Barely. But they're there. Yeah, I would have pumped those up, ideally. And this is our occlusion, roughness, and metallic. So if we go to channels over here, you'll notice that everything's packed in here. I believe red is the ambient occlusion. Green should be the roughness. And blue is our metallic. So black is not metal, white is metal. Gray is a mix, because there's like dust and stuff on top. So this is what that should look like. I know it looks kind of weird by default, but this is good. Clown colors are good. So we've got our textures exported. We've got our low poly textured here. Now it's time to add collisions and bring it all into Unreal Engine 4.